Eliza Whitford pressed her palm hard against her stomach and stopped breathing. 6 weeks. For 6 weeks she had carried his child, and for 6 weeks she had said nothing. Then she heard the laughter behind that study door, flat measured owned, and her husband's voice easy as a man counting coin. She did exactly what she was meant to do. Brought the land. Kept quiet. Her knees nearly gave out. Nearly gave. If you want to see how a woman turns that much betrayal into a reckoning, hit subscribe. Stay with this story to the very last word, and tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. She did not move. That was the first thing Eliza Whitford did when she heard her name come through the study door. Nothing. She stood in the long hall of the Whitford estate with her hand flat against her stomach, and her other hand still raised where it had been about to knock, and she did not move for a count of 7 breaths. She had practiced those breaths. Margaret Hale had taught them to her in the first month of the marriage, back when Eliza had been waking up at 3 in the morning with her heart kicking at her ribs like a cornered horse. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6, ma'am. That's what my own mother taught me when I was new in a house that wasn't mine yet. 4, 4, 6. Behind the door a man laughed. Not Jonathan. Another voice. A low, indulgent laugh, the kind grown men use when a younger man has told them something they find amusing because it is familiar. Then her husband's voice. She did exactly what she was meant to do. Brought the land. Kept quiet. 4, 4, 6. And the other matter. Handled. How handled? Quietly, the way she handles everything. I'll give her that much, she don't ask and she don't complain. A pause. And Evelyn, her stomach turned over. Evelyn understands. Evelyn has always understood. Give it 5 years, maybe 6, and the situation arranges itself. The other voice dry. 5 years is a long while, Whitford. Not so long. A son buys me the estate clear. After that, the rest is paperwork. Eliza closed her eyes. She had heard in her 23 years of life a great many things said about her. She had been called a quiet girl, a dutiful girl, a good match, a suitable wife. She had been called once by a cousin in Baltimore who did not know she was within earshot, a very serviceable sort of creature, and she had walked away from that remark and said nothing of it for 11 years. She had never in all that time been called an acquisition. She had never been called paperwork. She turned on her heel without making a sound and walked back down the hall. She did not run. A woman in a house that is not hers does not run. She walked, and she kept her hand on her stomach the whole way, and by the time she reached the narrow servant's stair at the back of the east wing, she already knew 3 things she had not known when she woke up that morning. She knew her husband had another woman. She knew her child was to him a deadline, and she knew she was not going to tell him about the child. Not yet. Not until she understood what it was worth. Margaret Hale was in the still room counting linens when Eliza came in. Margaret was the kind of woman who had run 4 houses in 4 counties over the course of her life and had never once in any of them been surprised by anything. She took one look at Eliza's face and set the stack down. "Ma'am." "Margaret." "Sit." "I don't need to sit." "Sit, Mrs. Whitford." Eliza sat. Margaret poured her a cup of water from the earthenware pitcher on the counter. She did not ask any questions. That was one of the things about Margaret. She did not ask. Eliza drank half the cup. She set it down. She looked at her hands, which were small and had never done any hard work, and which her mother had once told her were her most marriageable feature. "Margaret." "Ma'am, if a woman in this country, I mean in these states a married woman, if she wanted to know what her husband's business looked like on paper, who would she ask?" Margaret did not move. "The husband, ma'am." "Besides the husband." A pause. "Not a usual thing to ask, ma'am." "No." "Not a safe thing neither." "No." Margaret picked up a folded pillow slip. She smoothed the crease with the flat of her hand. She did not look up. "There's a man in Philadelphia," she said. "Name of Samuel Pierce. Handled my late husband's affairs after he passed. Honest man. slow but honest. His letters come through the post stage at Bridgewater Crossing on a Tuesday. Thank you, Margaret. Mrs. Whitford. Margaret, I ain't heard a word of this conversation. No, ma'am, Eliza said, and for the first time in 6 weeks, she did not feel her heart kicking like a cornered horse. It was doing something else now, something steadier, something with a rhythm to it. She stood up. Is Lily back from her walk? In the kitchen garden, ma'am. Tell her I'd like her in my room at 4, not before. Yes, ma'am. At the door, Eliza stopped. Margaret. Ma'am. Has there ever been a woman in this house before me? The older woman's hand went still over the linen. Ma'am, I've been in service to Mr. Whitford going on 2 years. That isn't what I asked. Margaret set the pillow slip down. There was a lady, she said carefully, before you. Not in the house, ma'am, not properly. She came calling twice, before the engagement. Miss Carter. Evelyn Carter. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Margaret. She walked out. Lily Whitford was 16 years old and had the bright, sharp, unguarded face of a girl who had not yet learned that the world was larger than the room she was standing in. She was Jonathan's younger sister, and Jonathan loved her, and she was the only person in the entire Whitford estate whom Eliza had ever seen him look at with anything like softness in his face. She came to Eliza's room at 4 o'clock on the dot and sat on the edge of the bed with her hands clasped in her lap. Eliza, you look strange. Do I? Like you swallowed a pin. I'm tired, Lily. Are you sick? No. Are you sad? Eliza looked at the girl. Lily had her brother's eyes. It was almost cruel how much she had her brother's eyes. Lily, I want to ask you something, and I want you to tell me plain. All right. Has your brother ever spoken to you of a woman named Evelyn Carter? Lily's face did a thing. A small betraying thing. A flinch around the mouth that she tried to hide by looking at her own hands. Lily. I don't rightly know, Eliza. You know. The girl's cheeks went pink. She used to come to the house, before. I was 12, maybe 13. She was older than me. She wore a green bonnet. Mama liked her. Did your mother want your brother to marry her? I reckon she did. Mama said... Lily stopped. What did your mother say, Lily? The girl whispered it because she was 16, and she had been raised to believe that saying a true thing about a man aloud was the same as striking him. She said the Carters had no land, and Jonathan needed land. So it was a pity, but it couldn't be helped. Eliza closed her eyes. There it was, the shape of it. A man who had wanted one woman and had married another for the acres her father attached to her like a saddle on a mare. A child on the way, who would, if male, close the estate papers, and if female, keep the whole arrangement dangling for another try. A first wife who was in the quiet accounting of the Whitford study, a holding pattern. Lily. Yes. Look at me. The girl looked up. I love you, Eliza said. That is a true thing. I have loved you since the first Sunday I was in this house. Whatever happens in the next weeks, you remember I said that. You remember it when you are being asked to pick a side because you will be asked. Eliza, what's? Not now, not tonight, but soon. And when that day comes, I want you to tell me the truth, even if it cost you your brother's good opinion. Can you do that? Lily's lip trembled. Yes. Thank you. Eliza, go wash your face before supper. Your eyes are pink. The girl stood up. At the door she turned. Eliza. He isn't a bad man. He isn't. I know, Lily. I know. The door closed. Eliza sat on the edge of her bed for a long time and did not cry. She had in fact already decided she was not going to cry about this, not once, not tonight, not ever, because tears were a currency, and this was a house that had taught her the first rule of currency, which was that you did not spend what you could not afford to lose. Instead, she did something she had never done in 14 months of marriage. She got up, walked to her writing desk, took out a fresh sheet of paper, and began a list. At the top, she wrote, "What I know." Below it, she wrote, "What I do not yet know." Below that, "What I must find out before he finds out that I am asking." She wrote for 40 minutes. When the supper bell rang, she folded the list into quarters, slid it under the lining of her sewing basket, put on her gray linen, and went downstairs to eat with her husband. Jonathan Whitford was a good-looking man of 31, with brown hair cut short, and a face that could have been called handsome if it had ever been still long enough to see. He was a man of movement. He sat down at the long dining table, snapped his napkin across his knee, reached for the bread before the grace, and said, "Eliza, you're pale." "Am I?" "You've been pale 2 weeks." "The heat." "Is it the heat?" "Yes. Margaret, tell the kitchen to cut back on the salt. She can't stand too much salt in summer." "Yes, sir." "Eliza, eat something." "I am." "You aren't. You're moving it. Eat." She ate. He watched her eat for a full minute, and then, satisfied, turned to a letter beside his plate and opened it with the flat of his butter knife. Jonathan Whitford was a man who could do 3 things at once and believe each of them his full attention. He read the letter. He ate his chicken. He spoke to her. "Bartholomew Finch is coming Thursday." "Oh." "He's bringing the Philadelphia papers." "Which papers?" He looked up. It was a small thing, a flick of the eyes, but she saw it. He had not expected her to ask which papers. She had never in 14 months asked which papers. "Estate business, Eliza. Nothing for you to trouble yourself with." "Of course. I only mention it because he'll be staying to supper, and I'd like the pheasant." "The pheasant. If it isn't too much." "It isn't too much." "Good girl." He went back to his letter. She went back to her plate. Good girl, she thought, and the phrase sat in her chest like a pebble in a boot. She had been called a good girl her entire life. Her father had called her a good girl. Her mother had called her a good girl. The minister who had married her had, at the moment of the binding vow, leaned down and said, "Bless this good girl." She had never in 23 years put down the phrase long enough to look at it. Now she looked at it. A good girl, she thought, was a girl who did not ask which papers. A good girl was a girl who brought the land and kept quiet. A good girl was a deadline. She set her fork down. "Jonathan? If I wanted to write to my cousin in Philadelphia, would there be any harm in it?" He did not look up from the letter. "Your cousin?" "Emmeline, Mama's sister's girl." "I don't recall her." "You wouldn't. She married a clerk." Well, write her if you wish. Margaret will see it goes to post." "Thank you, Eliza." Now he did look up. He looked at her across the long table with the candles between them, making small gold coins on the silver, and he looked at her in the particular way a man looks at a horse he has not ridden in a while and is assessing for soundness. "You've been quiet this week." "Have I?" "Quieter than usual, and you are not, as a rule, a loud woman." "The heat." "You keep saying the heat." "It's summer, Jonathan." He almost smiled. "So it is." He went back to his letter. She sat very still with her hands in her lap, and she thought for the first time since the morning of her wedding, "He does not know me. He has never known me. He has been living for 14 months with a woman he has not once looked at, and the reason he thinks I am quiet is that he has never been in a room where I was allowed to speak. That is going to be useful." After supper, Jonathan went back to the study. Eliza went upstairs, sat at her writing desk, and wrote a letter to her cousin Emmeline in Philadelphia. The letter was about the whether a new pattern for a summer shawl and the unfortunate decline of Aunt Matilda's rheumatism. It was signed, as all her letters were, "Your affectionate cousin Eliza." Then she wrote a second letter. This one was not to Emmeline. This one was to Mr. Samuel Pierce at such and such a chambers on Chestnut Street in the city of Philadelphia, and it read as follows: "Sir, I am writing to you on the recommendation of a mutual acquaintance, a Mrs. M. Hale, presently in my employment, who spoke well of your discretion. I am a married woman. I do not wish my husband to know of this correspondence. I ask you to understand before you read further that the cost of this letter being seen by the wrong hands is not financial but bodily, and I write it nonetheless because I have reached a point at which the cost of not writing it has become greater. I wish to know the following: whether a marriage settlement signed in the county of She wrote it in the spring of 1819 between one Jonathan Whitford and one Eliza Randolph contains a provision rendering the transfer of Randolph family acreage contingent upon the birth of a male heir within a stated number of years. Whether in the absence of such an heir, any portion of the said acreage reverts to the Whitford estate outright and under what terms, and whether a woman in this state married and with child possesses any legal standing whatsoever in the matter of her own property, her own person, or the custody of her unborn child, in the event that her husband should contest her competency before a court. I enclose $2 as a retainer. I will send further funds upon receipt of your reply, which I beg you send in an unmarked envelope to the post stage at Bridgewater Crossing, addressed to Mrs. M. Hale, who will deliver it to me. I sign myself. She held the pen still for a long moment. Then she wrote very carefully, Eliza Randolph Whitford, because whatever else was true in this house, whatever else had been signed over to her husband the afternoon, a minister blessed a good girl in a white dress, she had not yet given up her own name. She sealed the letter. She put it inside the letter to Emmeline. She tied both with a ribbon. She put them in the basket for the morning post. She blew out the candle. She lay down in the bed that had been her marriage bed for 14 months, and she put both hands flat on her stomach, and in the dark, very quietly, she spoke to the 6-week-old thing that was to her husband a deadline. "All right," she said. "All right, little one. Your mama heard what your daddy said about us today. And your mama is fixing to answer him. Not with her mouth. With her hand." She closed her eyes. Down the hall the study door opened, and she heard her husband's footsteps cross the landing to his own room, which was not her room, which had not been her room in a month. He stopped at her door. He did not come in. After a long moment, he walked on. In the dark, with her hands on her stomach, Eliza Whitford smiled a small, thin, unfamiliar smile. The first smile of her own she had worn in 14 months of marriage, and she thought very clearly, "Good. Keep walking. You're going to need the rest." The next morning she came down to breakfast with her hair braided and her color back in her face, and Jonathan was already at the table with his second cup of coffee and the Richmond paper folded beside his plate. "Eliza?" "Jonathan?" "You slept." "I did." "Good. You looked poorly last night." She sat. She took the cup Margaret poured for her. She lifted it to her mouth, and over the rim she watched her husband. And she thought, "A week ago I would not have seen you. I would have seen the shape of you. Jonathan. Who is Bartholomew Finch?" He looked up. There it was again. That small flicked glance. "My Philadelphia man." "Your Philadelphia man?" "Estate matters. Paperwork. He keeps the ledgers I don't keep." "I see. Why? You said he was coming Thursday. I wondered if I was meant to know him when he sat at my table." Jonathan smiled. It was not an unkind smile. It was the smile a man gives a child who has asked a bright question. "He's a dry old stick, Eliza. He won't speak 3 words to you all evening. Put out the pheasant and let him grunt at me over the port." "All right. You're curious this morning." "Am I?" "It suits you." She returned the smile. It cost her more than he knew. "It's the summer, Jonathan. A woman has to amuse herself somehow." He laughed. He went back to his paper. She drank her coffee, and she thought very clearly. He likes a woman who has just barely begun to be amused. He is going to regret liking it. Margaret came in with a plate of biscuits and set them down at Eliza's elbow. As she straightened, her hand brushed the edge of the table. A folded paper slid silent as a leaf from under the napkin at Eliza's place and disappeared into the fold of Eliza's sleeve. Neither woman's expression changed. "Will that be all, ma'am?" "For now, Margaret." Thank you. Ma'am. She left. Jonathan did not look up from his paper. Eliza finished her biscuit. She finished her coffee. She complimented the jam. She asked after the bay mare. She listened while Jonathan told her in the patient tone he used with her that the bay mare was in foal and would not be riddable till spring, and she nodded as if this was news to her, though she had been in the stable the day before and had put her own hand on the mare's side, and had felt the small quick knock of the foal under the skin, and had thought, "So there are two of us here now, you and me carrying a thing we did not ask for." She waited until Jonathan had folded his paper. "Will you ride today?" "Into town. I'll be back by 3. 3? Thereabouts. Safe journey." He kissed the top of her head on his way past her chair. She did not flinch. She had been a married woman for 14 months, and she had long since learned not to flinch at the top of her head being kissed. The door closed. She sat still until the hoofbeats went out past the gate. Then she stood, walked calmly up the stairs, shut her bedroom door, slid the bolt, pulled the folded paper from her sleeve, and sat down on the edge of the bed and read it. It was not from Samuel Pierce. It was from Margaret Hale. "Ma'am. A letter arrived at the post stage this morning addressed as you requested. I have placed it in the bottom of your sewing basket under the blue thread. M.H." Eliza was across the room before she had decided to move. She knelt at the basket. She pulled out the blue thread. Under it, flat against the lining, was a long, thin envelope. The seal was plain wax. The address read in a small, careful hand, "Mrs. M. Hale, Bridgewater Crossing." She broke the seal. "Madam, I have the honor of your letter. I acknowledge your retainer and will undertake on your behalf, and in strictest confidence, the inquiries you describe. Before further correspondence, I ask you to attend to the following. The marriage settlement you mention is a matter of public record in the county of its registration. It will take me some days to obtain a certified copy. In the meanwhile, I can tell you this much of general principle, which you may apply to your own case. A settlement of the kind you describe containing a reversion clause, dependent upon the birth of a male heir within a stated number of years, is not merely lawful in these states, but common among families of property. Such a clause is in the eyes of the law a conveyance of land, not a conveyance of marriage. The man who holds the signed settlement does not require the wife's consent to enforce it. He requires only the passage of time. In plain speech, madam, if the clause names 5 years, and at the close of 5 years there is no living male heir, the named acreage reverts to the husband's line by operation of the contract itself. Your signature and your father's signature have already agreed to it. No court in this state will set that aside on the grounds of a wife's objection. A wife in your position has no legal standing to contest her husband's disposition of property that he has acquired through her marriage. A wife in your position has no legal standing to separate from her husband without his consent, save in cases of proven abandonment or proven cruelty. A wife in your position has no legal standing over the custody of her child, born or unborn, in opposition to her husband's wishes. A wife in your position does, however, possess one thing the law does not take from her: time. If you have time, madam, you have leverage. You have time to gather proof, to copy documents, to place money beyond his reach, to secure witnesses, and to make allies of those whose word the courts will not take from a woman, but will take from a man. You have not yet said whether you have such time. Write me again plain, and I will know better how to advise you. Your servant, S. Pierce. She read it twice. Then she folded it very small, and she went to the fireplace, and she held it over the grate, with her hand shaking for the first time all morning, and then she did not burn it. She put it instead between the pages of her household book under the entry for June preserves, where Jonathan would never look, because Jonathan did not know the difference between raspberry and currant and had never once in his life opened the household book. She sat back down at her desk. She wrote 2 words at the top of a fresh page: I have. Below it, I have time. Then she began to plan. By noon she had done 3 things. She had walked down to the kitchen on the pretext of discussing menus, and had watched without seeming to where Margaret kept the ring of house keys. She had lingered in the front hall long enough to observe that the key to Jonathan's study hung separately on a hook behind the long case clock, and that it was moved twice a day, once in the morning when the maid went in to dust, and once in the evening when Jonathan locked the door for the night. And she had on her way back upstairs stopped outside the study and tried the latch and found it open. He had forgotten to lock it. Men who believed their wives did not ask which papers did not always lock their studies. She stepped inside. She did not go to the desk. She went first to the shelf beside the window. She had been in this room exactly 3 times in 14 months of marriage. She had noticed on the last occasion that Jonathan kept a green leather-bound ledger on the second shelf and a red one on the third, and that he had once closed the red one very quickly when she came in with a question about the dinner hour. She took down the red one. She opened it to the first page. Whitford Estate. Private accounts. J. Whitford commenced April 1818. She turned the page, and she saw her own name, not at the top, not in any obvious place. She saw it in a column of acreage transfers under a heading that read, in Jonathan's cramped business hand, Randolph Conveyance. And beside her name was the word wife. And beside the word wife was a number, and beside the number was a second column headed reversion, and beside that column was a date. April the 3rd, 1823. 5 years from the date of her marriage. She stood with the ledger in her hands, and she did not cry. She did not put her hand to her mouth. She did not do any of the things a woman is said in books to do when she discovers the mechanism of her own sale. She stood very still, and she memorized the page, the numbers, the column headings, the date, and then she turned the page and found a second entry, and a third and a fourth. The last entry read, E. Carter anticipated settlement pending reversion. Eliza closed the ledger. She put it back exactly as she had found it, the spine aligned with the spine of the green ledger beside it, the dust undisturbed. And then, because she was a woman who had decided that morning to become a different kind of woman, she did one thing more. She opened the middle drawer of Jonathan's desk because she had seen him close it quickly on the night she'd walked in to ask about supper. And she found folded flat against the base of the drawer a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon that had once been green and was now the color of old tea. There were 17 letters. The topmost was dated the spring before her own wedding. She did not have time to read them. She lifted the bundle. She held it against her chest. She walked out of the study. She climbed the back stair. She shut her bedroom door. She slid the bolt. She sat on the floor with her back against the bed, and she untied the ribbon. My dearest J, you write me that I must be patient. And I have been patient because you ask it of me, and because I love you, and because I have loved you since we were children in my father's parlor, and you put a pear blossom behind my ear, and told me I was the only girl in the county who listened when you spoke. But patience, my love has a shape. It cannot be patient forever. You write that the matter requires 5 years. I will give you 5. You write that the girl brings land we need. I accept the land. You write that the girl is dutiful and will make no trouble. I accept the girl for her own sake, for she has done me no wrong. What I cannot accept, J, is your silence when I write you of my own affairs. You must tell me plainly. Is there or is there not in the settlement you have signed a provision by which the land returns to you at the end of 5 years, whether the wife bears a child or does not? I have had it from your cousin. Yes, he has written me. Do not be angry that there is such a clause. I must know its terms. For if such a clause exists, J, I am content. If it does not, I must tell you plain. I cannot wait on a maybe. I am 29 years old, and my father is dying, and if I am to be anything other than a spinster keeping his house till he passes, I must know the ground I stand on. Write me, my love. Write me plain. I am your Evelyn. Eliza read the letter through to the end. She picked up the second. She read that one, and the third, and the fourth. She sat on the floor of her bedroom for an hour and a half, and she read every letter in the bundle, and by the time she had finished, she knew the following. Evelyn Carter was 29. She had been promised Jonathan Whitford since she was a girl in her father's parlor. Her father's land had been mortgaged and lost in the panic of 19, and she had come to the marriage market empty-handed. Jonathan had told her in writing in his own hand in a letter that sat folded in Eliza's lap, that he would marry her the day his circumstances permitted. And he had told her in the same letter that his circumstances would permit it on the 3rd of April, 1823, whether Eliza bore a child or did not, because the reversion clause did not depend on the child. It depended only on the 5 years. Eliza sat very still on the floor of her bedroom, with 17 letters in her lap, and she understood for the first time that her child was not her husband's deadline. Her child was her own. Her child was the only thing in this arrangement that was hers, because a woman who bore Jonathan Whitford a son inside those 5 years became, by the logic of her father's settlement, the mother of his heir, and the mother of a man's heir. Even in these states, even in this century, even in this county, was not a woman a court would set aside lightly. A childless wife at the end of 5 years was paperwork. The mother of a living son was an inconvenience the law respected. She put her hands flat on her stomach. "Hold on, little one," she said. "You're the only leverage I've got." Then she tied the ribbon back around the letters exactly as it had been the loop to the left, the tail 2 inches long, the crease along the spine of the bundle, and she walked them back down to the study, and she put them in the bottom of the middle drawer, and she closed the drawer, and she walked out. At 3 o'clock, Jonathan rode back up the lane. She was on the porch with her mending in her lap, and a glass of lemonade on the rail, and a small composed smile on her mouth, and when he swung down from the saddle and came up the steps, she rose and kissed his cheek. "Jonathan?" "Eliza." "You're early." "I am. Finch sent word. He's coming tomorrow, not Thursday." "Tomorrow." "He has business in Norfolk on Thursday." "All right, I'll tell the kitchen." "Pheasant?" "Pheasant." He looked at her. "Are you well?" "Never better." "You look well." "Thank you." He went inside. She sat back down. She picked up her mending. Her hands, she noticed with a small detached interest, did not shake at all. She was looking at the line of her own stitching, which was even and straight, and did not betray a thing, and she was thinking, "I have until the 3rd of April, 1823. I have 3 years and 9 months. A woman with 3 years and 9 months and a living child in her body is not a woman without standing. She is a woman with an instrument, and I have," she thought, "just learned how to read music." That evening, Lily came to her room again, and the girl's eyes were red, and she stood at the foot of Eliza's bed with her hands twisted in her apron, and she said without preamble, "I lied to you yesterday." "Did you?" "Not big. Small. I didn't say the whole thing." "Lily, sit down." She sat. "What didn't you say, Lily?" "Evelyn Carter." The girl swallowed. "She writes to him still. I've seen the letters. Mama's side of the family sends them through our Aunt Beatrice in Williamsburg. Beatrice passes them to Jonathan when he rides to town on Tuesdays." She looked up. "I didn't tell you because Jonathan said if I ever told anyone about the Williamsburg letters, he would send me north to our uncle's house, and I would not see Mama's grave again till I was 21. Eliza did not move. "He threatened you." "He said it like a joke." "But he meant it." "Yes." Eliza reached across the bedspread and took the girl's hand in her own, and she held it. "Lily, look at me." Lily looked. "You are 16 years old, and your brother just used your dead mother against you to keep you quiet. Do you hear me saying that plain?" "Eliza." "Plain, Lily." "Yes." "Good. Now hear me say this plain too. From this moment you are not alone in this house. Whatever he threatens you with, you come to me. Whatever he asks you to keep quiet, you come to me. I cannot promise you he will not hurt us. I can promise you he will not hurt us one at a time." The girl's lip trembled. "Eliza, I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart." "Are you scared?" Eliza considered it honestly. "I was scared yesterday," she said. "Today I am something else." "What?" "Awake." Lily swallowed. "Eliza." There's one more thing." Eliza waited. "Aunt Beatrice is coming." "When?" "With Mr. Finch. Tomorrow. She wrote yesterday. Jonathan didn't tell you. Eliza sat very still. Why is she coming, Lily? I don't know. I only saw the letter on his desk. What did it say? Lily closed her eyes. She repeated it from memory, in the flat, unhappy voice of a child who has taught herself to remember things she was not meant to see. It said, "Dear nephew, I come on Wednesday as agreed. Finch has the papers. We will proceed as discussed. It is past time the matter of the wife was addressed properly." Eliza's hand went to her stomach. It did so without her telling it to. Lily? Yes. Go to your room. Lock the door. If anyone asks, you were with me all evening reading Psalms. Can you do that? Yes. Go. The girl went. The girl, Eliza, sat on the edge of her bed with her hand flat on her belly, and she listened to the sound of the house, the footsteps of the scullery maid in the back stair, the closing of a shutter, the faint creak of the study door as her husband 3 rooms away locked it for the night. And she thought without drama, with the steady, clear feeling of a woman who has just seen the exact shape of the ground she is standing on, the matter of the wife. Tomorrow. I have not got 3 years and 9 months. I have got till morning. She did not sleep. She sat at her writing desk with a single candle, and she wrote for 3 hours without lifting her head. And when she was finished, she had in front of her 7 sheets of paper covered in her own small, careful hand. 3 of them were copies. 2 of them were a list of names. 1 of them was a letter. The last was a single sheet with 4 sentences on it, which she folded twice and slid inside the bodice of her nightgown against her skin. At 2 in the morning, Margaret Hale knocked once on the bedroom door. "Ma'am?" "Come in, Margaret." The older woman came in with a shawl around her shoulders and her gray hair in a plait down her back, and she set a small tin cup of warm milk on the desk without being asked, and she stood with her hands folded and waited. "Margaret." "Ma'am." "Can Zeke drive the buggy before dawn?" "He can." "Can he be at the post stage by 6? He can be at Bridgewater Crossing by 5:30 if he don't stop to water the mare." "Good. These 3 letters go with him. The one to Mr. Pierce goes express. The one to my cousin Emmeline goes general post. The 3rd one," she tapped it, "goes to my father in Baltimore, by hand. I don't want that one in any bag. Zeke finds a rider who's going north and pays him $2 to carry it." "Yes, ma'am." "And Margaret." "Ma'am. If I am not in this house by sundown tomorrow, if anything happens between now and the close of business, you take Lily, and you take this box." She slid a small wooden box across the desk. "And you go to my cousin Emmeline's. You do not stop at the Carter place. You do not stop at any Whitford connection. You go to Philadelphia. Mr. Pierce's address is inside the lid. You give him the box and you tell him what happened." Margaret did not move. "Ma'am." "Yes." "What's in the box?" "Everything, Margaret. The ledger copies, the letter from Evelyn, the settlement summary, everything he has signed and did not know I copied." A pause. "Ma'am, you've been busy tonight." "I have." "All right, I'll wake Zeke." She turned. "Margaret." "Ma'am?" "Thank you." The older woman stopped at the door. She did not turn around. "Mrs. Whitford." "Yes. My own husband was not a Whitford, but he was a man, and he died believing I could not read the papers he signed. I read them, ma'am. I read every one. There is a particular kind of satisfaction in being underestimated for 30 years and then not being underestimated for an afternoon. I have been waiting, I think, to see another woman take a turn at it." She went out. Eliza drank the warm milk. Then she dressed. She did not dress in black. She did not dress in her best. She dressed in the gray linen Jonathan had told her on 3 separate occasions suited her. She braided her hair the way he liked. She put her grandmother's small gold cross at her throat. She looked when she was done exactly like the good girl she had been the day before. She looked like a woman who did not ask which papers. Then she walked downstairs at 6:30 in the morning, and she sat in the breakfast room and she waited. Finch arrived at 9. Aunt Beatrice arrived at 6:30. Jonathan, who had been up since 7, and had been in and out of the study 3 times, and had not spoken 4 words to her over his coffee, met them at the front door himself. Bartholomew. Whitford. Aunt. Nephew. Come through. Eliza is in the breakfast room. Eliza rose when they came in. She rose slowly with one hand on the back of her chair, the way a pregnant woman rises when she does not yet wish to be known as a pregnant woman. She smiled. She extended her hand. Mr. Finch, how good of you to come. Madam. Aunt Beatrice. Eliza. Beatrice Whitford was a woman of 62 with an upright carriage and a face that had been handsome once, and had hardened over 4 decades of widowhood into something harder than handsome. She looked at Eliza. She did not quite smile. You are looking thin, my dear. The heat, aunt. So Jonathan writes me. Does he write of me, aunt? A small silence. He writes of the household. Ah. Jonathan stepped in quickly. Shall we go through to the study? Eliza, we shan't need you. I'll come. He stopped. Eliza. I'll come, Jonathan. I want to greet Mr. Finch properly, and I have not yet offered aunt a seat. Eliza, this is estate. Business, I know. And as Mr. Finch is kind enough to have traveled so far, the least I can do is pour the coffee before I excuse myself. She said it smoothly. She said it with the precise, pleasant smile of a wife who does not know anything and is merely trying to be gracious. Finch, who was a man of 60 and had spent 30 years in rooms full of men like Jonathan, inclined his head. Very kind, madam. Please, through here. And before Jonathan could stop her, she had walked them not to the study, but to the large south parlor. The formal room, the room with the 3 windows and the long sofa, and no door that locked from the inside. And she had rung the bell for Margaret, and she had seated Aunt Beatrice on the sofa, and she had seated Finch in the wing chair by the hearth, and she had poured the coffee herself with a hand that did not tremble. Jonathan stood in the doorway. Eliza. Yes, dear. The study would be more comfortable. It would be more private, you mean? A beat. She looked at him across the coffee service. She smiled. She did not raise her voice. Jonathan, I would like to be present for this conversation. Eliza. I will be present for this conversation. Aunt Beatrice set her cup down. Nephew, a word. Aunt. Sit. He sat. Beatrice turned her full face upon Eliza. It was not an unkind face. It was the face of a woman who had lived a long time in a world that did not belong to her, and had made her peace with the arrangement by becoming one of its custodians. Eliza. My dear, I am going to speak plainly because I have found plain speech saves a great many tears. Mr. Finch has traveled up from Philadelphia at my request because we, Jonathan and I, have reached a point at which we feel it is necessary to speak with you about your health. My health. Your nerves, child. My nerves. You have been, by your husband's account and by my own observation, increasingly withdrawn these past months. You have kept to your room. You have eaten poorly. You have, I am told, wept in corridors. Mr. Finch has in his portfolio the draft of a deed of trust by which Jonathan would, with your consent, my dear, always with your consent, assume care of your affairs during a period of rest. A period, say, at my house in Williamsburg, where you may recover under my care for as long as may be needed. Eliza did not move her face. She did not move her hands. She said very calmly, A deed of trust. Yes, child. Removing me from this house. For your health. And placing my person, and by extension, any child I may carry under the guardianship of my husband, for as long as may be needed. A silence. It was a real silence. Finch looked at Jonathan. Jonathan looked at the fire. Aunt Beatrice's smile did not quite flicker. My dear, a child. 6 weeks, aunt. Jonathan's head came up. Eliza. 6 weeks, Jonathan. I would have told you Sunday. I would have told you last Sunday in the study after church. I walked to the door with my hand raised to knock. And I heard you through that door tell Mr. Whatley, I believe it was Mr. Whatley, that I had done exactly what I was meant to do. That I had brought the land. That I had kept quiet. She paused. I decided at that moment not to tell you on Sunday. The room had gone very still. "I decided to tell you," she said, "on a morning of my own choosing. This is that morning." Finch cleared his throat. "Madam, if I may." "Mr. Finch." A child alters. A child alters the contract, Mr. Finch. Yes, I am aware." Beatrice's mouth had opened slightly. She closed it. "Eliza, you are certain?" "I am certain." "You have seen a physician?" "I have seen two, one in Norfolk and one in Richmond. I have their letters. They are with my attorney." Jonathan turned his head. "Your attorney?" "Mine." "You have no attorney, Eliza." "I do, Jonathan." "Since when?" "Since the Monday before last." "What who?" "Samuel Pierce, of Philadelphia. He writes me that the settlement you signed with my father in the spring of 1819 contains a reversion clause returning the Randolph acreage to the Whitford estate on the 3rd of April, 1823, independent of whether I have borne a child. He writes me further that no court in this state will set that clause aside on the grounds of a wife's objection. He writes me lastly that a wife does however retain one instrument the law does not take from her. She did not raise her voice. "Time, Jonathan. I have had time." Aunt Beatrice's hand had gone involuntarily to the brooch at her throat. "Eliza, child, whatever you believe you have." "Aunt, I have read the letters." A beat. "Letters, 17 of them, from Evelyn Carter, dating from the spring before my wedding to the 3rd of June of this year. The one from last month mentions you by name, Aunt. You are the conduit, it seems. Letters through Williamsburg. I believe the expression in the letter was through our dear Beatrice, who keeps the gate." A silence. A silence of a different kind. Beatrice's face did not move, but a slow, ugly color came up under the powder at her throat. "Eliza." "Aunt, those letters are in a box, in a place you cannot reach, along with copies of the reversion clause, copies of the private account ledger from Jonathan's study, and a statement from Mr. Pierce of Philadelphia, summarizing the whole matter for presentation to the Chancery Court in the state of Pennsylvania, where Mr. Pierce informs me a woman in my condition has considerably more standing than she enjoys in Virginia." Finch said very quietly, "Madam, you have retained counsel in Pennsylvania." "I have, Mr. Finch. A pregnant married woman of this state can cross a state line, Mr. Finch. There is no law that binds her feet to this parlor." Jonathan stood up. "Eliza." "Sit down, Jonathan." "Eliza, I will not." "Sit down." He did not sit. She looked at him. She looked at him the way she had never looked at him in 14 months of marriage. She looked at him without the small, pleasant smile, without the angle of the head, without the quiet deference of the good girl. She looked at him full in the face. "You have," she said, "1 hour." "1 hour for what?" "To choose." "Eliza, to choose, Jonathan, between the two women in your life, because you cannot have both. You have spent 3 years believing you could have both, and I am telling you this morning in front of Mr. Finch and in front of your aunt that the arrangement is closed. I have in my hand the evidence to have your reversion clause challenged on the grounds of fraudulent inducement you represented to my father in writing that you would ensure the marriage was a good faith union, and you did not, and I have the evidence to have your aunt's role in the Williamsburg correspondence made a matter of public record in 3 counties. She turned to Beatrice. "Aunt, I believe your social position, such as it is, depends on not being publicly known as the woman who carried a promised mistress's letters to a married nephew." Beatrice did not speak. "That is what I thought." She turned back to Jonathan. "You have 1 hour. You will during that hour with Mr. Finch as witness sign 3 documents. The first is an acknowledgement of the child I carry as your lawful heir with inheritance rights, regardless of sex, and a formal renunciation of the reversion clause in the settlement of 1819. The second is a deed of trust in my favor over the Randolph acreage, irrevocable during my lifetime. The third is a written undertaking that any further correspondence between yourself and Miss Evelyn Carter will cease from this day forward, and that you will not contest under any circumstances, on any grounds, in any state, my custody of this child, born or unborn." She paused. "Mr. Finch has the skill to draw those documents. I believe he has the paper in his portfolio. I believe in fact that he traveled here this morning with paper prepared to remove me from this house, and I believe with a little rearrangement that paper can be put to a better use." Finch looked down at his portfolio. "Madam?" "Mr. Finch? This is most irregular, I know. I am retained by your husband. You are retained by the Whitford estate. I am, as of this moment, the mother of the Whitford heir. I believe you will find on reflection that your duty is to the estate, not to the gentleman." Finch looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Jonathan. "Whitford. Finch. She is not wrong about the estate." Jonathan did not answer. "Whitford, sit down." He sat. Aunt Beatrice drew one long, careful breath. "Eliza." "Aunt." "You are not what I took you for." "No, Aunt, I am not. I reckon a great many people in this family are about to discover they were not what they took each other for. I find it is a condition that can be borne with practice." A small, thin smile touched Beatrice's mouth. Not kind, not warm, but something that might in another woman on another morning have been the beginning of respect. "Mr. Finch, draw the papers." "Aunt," Jonathan began. "Nephew, be quiet." "Aunt, you cannot." "I can and I will, and I shall tell you why. Because your wife has just produced in the space of 6 minutes and without raising her voice a more complete inventory of the vulnerabilities of this family than you have in 3 years of managing them. And because a woman capable of that inventory is not a woman one disposes of, nephew. One negotiates with her. And one does not, after the negotiation, ever again make the mistake of speaking freely behind a door she happens to be walking past." She turned to Eliza. "My dear." "Aunt." "Consider the Williamsburg matter between us." "I consider nothing between us, Aunt, until the papers are signed." "Very well." Finch had already drawn out a fresh sheet. He had uncapped the small traveling inkwell. He was with the efficient hands of a man who had drawn a great many difficult documents in a great many difficult parlors beginning to write. Jonathan was looking at his own hands. He looked at them for a long time. Then, without lifting his head, he said, "Eliza." "Jonathan." "I did not." "Jonathan, I am not taking statements this morning. I am taking signatures. Save the explanations. You will have time for them in the next 40 years. We will not, I think, run out of evenings in which you may try to tell me who you meant to be." He closed his mouth. He did not open it again for an hour and 17 minutes. At the end of an hour and 17 minutes, 3 documents lay on the low table between the sofa and the hearth, each signed by Jonathan Whitford, each witnessed by Bartholomew Finch, each countersigned in a careful, decisive hand by Beatrice Whitford. Eliza rose. She gathered the 3 documents. She folded each one. She placed them in the small writing case she had brought down with her from her bedroom, the writing case that had, until an hour earlier, sat unnoticed in the corner beside her chair. She looked at her husband. "Jonathan." "Eliza, we will dine together this evening. The pheasant as agreed. Mr. Finch will be our guest. Aunt will remain the night. I believe the pattern of this house will continue as far as the servants see exactly as it has. Do we understand one another?" "Yes." "Good." She turned at the door. "Aunt." "Child, I did not doubt when I sat down this morning that you would see where the wind blew. It is one of the few things I can say I admired about you before today. I do not withdraw the admiration. I only widen it." Beatrice inclined her head. Just slightly. Just enough. Eliza walked out. She walked up the stairs. She walked into her own bedroom. She closed the door. She slid the bolt. She set the writing case on the desk. She sat down on the edge of the bed, and only then, only with the door shut, only with the bolt slid, only with 3 signed pages lying in a leather case an arm's length away, did Eliza Whitford put her face in her hands and begin finally to shake. She shook for 4 full minutes. Then she stopped. She washed her face at the basin. She put both hands on her stomach. She spoke very quietly to the child that had just bought her a kingdom she had no intention of ruling from any throne her husband had ever sat on. "All right, little one. Round 1. She did not smile. She was not a woman now who smiled after a thing like that. She was a woman now who went to her writing desk and sat down and opened a fresh sheet and began to plan round 2. Round 2 began 6 days later, and it did not begin the way she had expected. It began with a knock on the kitchen door at 5 o'clock in the morning. Margaret Hale was the one who opened it. Margaret was always the one who opened the kitchen door before dawn because Margaret had been awake since 4. And because Margaret was the kind of woman who trusted no hand but her own to judge a thing before the sun was up. She opened the door with a lamp in her hand, and she stood with the lamp held high, and she looked out into the kitchen yard, and she said, "Ma'am, you better come down." Eliza was down in 3 minutes. She came down in her dressing gown with her hair loose and her hand on the rail and her other hand on her stomach, because she had taken in the 6 days since the signing to keeping that hand there whenever she walked, not from sentiment, but from a small fierce habit of acknowledgement, as a farmer will put a hand on a good horse each morning to say, "I know you. I know what we are to each other." "Margaret." "What?" "On the step, ma'am." She looked. There was a woman on the step. She was perhaps 29 years old. She was tall. She was dressed in a traveling cloak that had mud to the hem. She had no bonnet. She had in her hand a small leather satchel of the kind a man carries on a long ride, and she was looking at Eliza with the particular exhausted directness of a person who has slept in coaches for 3 days and has now arrived at the only door left to her. "Are you Mrs. Whitford?" "I am." "My name is Evelyn Carter." Eliza did not move. Behind her, Margaret made a very small sound. "I know who I am to you," Evelyn Carter said. "I know what that name means in this house. I have come nonetheless because I have nowhere else to go this morning, and because what I have to say to you I will not entrust to paper, and because—" Her voice cracked. "Because I have just been told by a gentleman in Richmond that your husband has filed in the county court yesterday afternoon a petition to have you declared mentally unsound." Margaret stepped forward. "Inside, miss. Now, before the stable boy sees you." They brought her into the kitchen. They sat her at the long pine table. Margaret put a cup of coffee in front of her. Eliza did not sit. Eliza stood at the head of the table with both hands on the back of the chair, and she looked at the woman who had for 3 years been the shape of the empty space in her husband's study. "Miss Carter." "Mrs. Whitford." "Say it again." "He has filed yesterday, the afternoon of the 17th in the county court in Richmond, a petition for a writ of lunacy against his wife. The grounds stated are excessive nervous agitation, improper conduct of correspondence, and—" she swallowed, "and attempted interference in the lawful business affairs of her husband." "How do you know this?" "Because he wrote me 3 nights ago telling me to hold. He said by the end of this month the difficulty would be resolved. He said, a wife declared unsound by a court of this state loses standing in every contract she has signed, including any made under duress during the condition of her unsoundness." Eliza's hand tightened on the chair. "He wrote that to you?" "In his own hand. I have the letter in the satchel." "A beat. Why are you bringing it to me?" Evelyn Carter looked up. Her eyes were the particular red of a woman who had cried the tears out 2 days ago and had not been able to cry any new ones since. "Mrs. Whitford, I was a girl of 12 when I was promised to Jonathan Whitford. I was a woman of 29 when I read the letter in which he explained to me with considerable patience that in order to marry me, he intended to have his present wife locked in an asylum. I have, I believe, loved him all of my conscious life. I have loved him past every reasonable point at which a woman is meant to stop. I have kept his letters. I have defended his silences. I have waited for him through a marriage I was told was a formality." Her voice did not shake. "I am not prepared to love him through this. Miss Carter, I am not asking you to trust me. Good, because I don't. I am asking you to look at the letter. The letter is in his hand. The envelope is stamped. The postmark is Norfolk 3 days ago. If I wished to deceive you, I would not have brought you a document that places my own hand at the center of a criminal conspiracy to defraud a woman of her civil person." A silence. Margaret spoke from the stove. "Ma'am, the satchel." Eliza held out her hand. Evelyn Carter set the letter in it without a word. Eliza did not read it in the kitchen. She walked with the letter in her hand through the back hall and up the narrow stair to her bedroom, and she shut the door, and she sat at her desk, and she read it. It was as Evelyn had said in Jonathan's hand. It was also as Evelyn had not said worse than the description. My dearest. The matter moves. Finch is reluctant, but Beatrice has been brought around. She saw after some reflection that the alternative, a woman of demonstrated willfulness in command of the estate, would in time destroy her own position in the family. The petition is drawn. The physicians are secured. I have retained two, one in Richmond, one in Norfolk, both of whom have examined her previous correspondence and are prepared to swear to patterns of nervous disorder extending some months prior to the present alleged agitation. The child, if it comes to it, is a complication, but not one the court will refuse to set aside on clear medical evidence. A fetus has no standing. A mad woman's child is assigned to the father in any case. The whole matter can be concluded before the frost. Burn this letter. Burn it now. Yours. J. Eliza read it twice. She did not shake this time. She did not have 4 minutes left over for shaking. She folded the letter. She put it inside a fresh envelope. She sealed it with her own ring. She went downstairs. Evelyn Carter was still at the kitchen table. Her hands were around the coffee cup. She had not drunk any of it. Miss Carter. Mrs. Whitford. Stand up. The woman stood. Margaret, get Lily. Quietly. Do not light the hall lamps. Tell her to come down dressed for travel. Ma'am. Miss Carter, do you have family in this state? None who would receive me this morning. Money. $40 in the satchel. A horse. A hired buggy at the post inn. I drove it myself. Eliza nodded once. You will go back to that buggy. You will drive it to the post stage at Bridgewater Crossing. You will ask at the window for a man named Zeke Pratt. He is my coachman. He is there every morning at 6:30 to meet the northbound post. You will give him this letter. She handed over the sealed envelope. And you will tell him to take it directly in his own hand to Mr. Samuel Pierce, Chestnut Street, Philadelphia. You will tell him I said the word sparrow. He will know what that means. Mrs. Whitford. Miss Carter, I am not finished. Yes, you will then return to this house. You will enter by the front door. You will, in the parlor, in the presence of my husband's aunt, and Mr. Finch, repeat the statement you made to me at this table this morning. You will produce the letter, not this one, I am keeping this one, but the letter you say you received 3 nights ago. You will state plainly in front of witnesses that you were informed in writing by Jonathan Whitford of his intent to have his wife declared a lunatic for the purpose of voiding the agreement he signed in this house 6 days ago. Mrs. Whitford. Miss Carter. If I do that, I am finished. In this state, in any society I have ever known, I will not be received anywhere. I know. I will have given up everything you had already lost, Miss Carter. He made his choice about you in that letter 3 nights ago. I am offering you the chance to make your own choice on the record, while there is still a record to make it on. If you do not, you will spend the rest of your life as a woman who knew and said nothing. I have been that woman for 14 months. I do not recommend it. A silence. Why? Evelyn Carter said. Why would you use me? I am the woman who... You are the woman who was lied to by the same man. We are not friends, Miss Carter. We will never be friends. But we are this morning the only 2 people in Virginia who have read his true handwriting, and that is a small, ugly club to which we both belong, and I am asking you to stand in a parlor and say so. Another silence. Then Evelyn Carter very slowly nodded. All right. Go. Mrs. Whitford. Go, Miss Carter, quickly, before the house wakes. She went. At 6 o'clock, Lily came down in a dark gray dress, with her hair braided flat and a small canvas bag in her hand. She did not ask a question. She did not cry. She took Eliza's hand in the kitchen doorway, and she held it for 3 seconds, and she said in a small, steady voice, Where am I going, Eliza? To Mrs. Hale's sister in Petersburg, sweetheart. Just for a week. There's a driver waiting at the lane. You'll be back before your brother notices you were gone. Is he going to be angry? Yes. With you. With me. All right. The girl kissed her sister-in-law on the cheek. She walked out the kitchen door in the dark. Margaret came back in 3 minutes later. Gone, ma'am. Both of them. Both of them. Zeke has the letter. Miss Carter is ahead of him on the road. Lily's driver had the second buggy waiting past the north pasture fence. No one at the stable saw a thing. Good. Ma'am? Yes. He'll know by 9. I know he'll know by 9. What do I do when he comes down? You serve him coffee, Margaret. You do not mention his sister. You do not mention Miss Carter. You tell him I am resting upstairs and that I asked not to be disturbed before 10. If he asks where Lily is, you tell him she rose early and went out to the kitchen garden. If he goes to look, you do not follow. Yes, ma'am. Margaret. Ma'am. There is a revolver in the bottom drawer of my writing desk. A pause. Yes, ma'am. It was my grandfather's. I have had it since I was 17. Yes, ma'am. I do not intend to use it. I intend to be in the parlor at 10 o'clock when Miss Carter returns, and I intend to be in the parlor at noon, when the three of us, Miss Carter, myself, and Mr. Finch, address my husband. I intend the entire matter to be settled by 3 in the afternoon, and to be in a coach by sundown. Yes, ma'am. But if between 9 o'clock, when he learns that his sister is gone, and 10 o'clock when Miss Carter returns, if in that hour my husband should decide that a wife already on the brink of being declared unsound might usefully have an accident on the back stair, ma'am, I am telling you where the revolver is, Margaret. Yes, ma'am, I heard you. They looked at each other across the kitchen. I've been, Margaret said very quietly, carrying a small knife in my apron since Tuesday last, ma'am. I did not mention it. I did not wish to worry you. Eliza almost laughed. She did not quite laugh. The laugh came up into her throat and stopped there, and became instead a single hard breath through her nose. Margaret Hale. Ma'am. You are the finest woman I have ever known. Ma'am, if you'll pardon me, we'll sort out the compliments when you're on the road to Philadelphia. Right now, you'd best go up and dress. She went up. She dressed. She dressed in the gray linen again because she had learned over 6 days that there was a kind of power in being the woman a man thought he already knew. She braided her hair. She fastened the gold cross. She loaded with hands that did not shake and had not shaken for 6 days. Her grandfather's old revolver, and she slid it into the bottom of her work basket underneath a half-finished piece of embroidery that read in careful cross-stitch, "Charity suffereth long and is kind," and she walked down to the breakfast room, and she waited. Jonathan came down at 8. Eliza? Jonathan. Lily's not at table. She rose early. I understand she's in the kitchen garden. At this hour? She is 16, Jonathan. She does as she pleases. He looked at her. He looked at her a beat too long. You are cheerful this morning. The weather has turned. Has it? A cool wind came up in the night. I opened my window. He poured his coffee. He sat. He opened the paper. At 8:30, Margaret came in with a plate of biscuits, set them down, and said without inflection, Mr. Whitford, beg pardon, the boy from Richmond is at the front door. He says it's urgent. Jonathan looked up. The boy from Richmond. He has a letter, sir. He says it's from Dr. Havemeyer. Jonathan's coffee stopped halfway to his mouth. He set the cup down. Eliza across the table smiled gently into her tea. Dr. Havemeyer, Jonathan. How interesting. Is he one of your Richmond friends? He did not answer. He stood up. He walked out of the breakfast room. She heard his boots in the hall. She heard the front door open. She heard a young voice, a boy of 14, perhaps, deliver a message with the breathless clarity of a child who has been paid to repeat it exactly. She did not catch the words. She did not need to. She had written them herself at 2:30 in the morning, and she had given them to Zeke Pratt, along with $1 for the first boy at the stage who had a fast pony. And the message was this: Dr. Havemeyer regrets. He withdraws from the commission. He has received information concerning the subject of the proposed examination that makes it impossible for him to continue in good conscience. He has accordingly written to the county clerk this morning, withdrawing his deposition in support of the petition filed yesterday afternoon. He understands that Dr. Westbrook in Norfolk has, upon receiving similar information overnight, taken the same decision. The petition as of this morning has no medical support. She heard her husband's boots stop in the hall. She heard them stay stopped for a long time. She sipped her tea. Behind her, Margaret refilled the pot. More tea, ma'am. Thank you, Margaret. Ma'am. Yes. That was well done. Not yet, Margaret. Not till Miss Carter is back in this house. Not till the parlor. Not till he sees the two of us sitting side by side on that long sofa at 10 o'clock. Ma'am. Yes. I reckon he's about to walk back in here. I reckon he is. The footsteps started again. They came down the hall. They came to the breakfast room door. They stopped. Jonathan Whitford stood in the doorway of his own breakfast room, and he looked at his wife across the table, the gray linen, the small gold cross, the quiet hands folded beside the teacup, the workbasket at her feet, and Eliza Whitford looked back at him, and she did not smile, and she did not rise. And she said, in the plain, pleasant voice of a good girl who had brought the land and kept quiet, "Jonathan, you are pale. Sit down. Have a biscuit." He did not sit. He said very quietly, "What have you done?" "I have had," she said, "a busy night." "Eliza, we will be 3 in the parlor at 10 o'clock, Jonathan. You, myself, and Miss Carter. Mr. Finch will be the 4th. I believe your aunt will make 5. I believe the conversation will take approximately 1 hour, and I believe by 11 o'clock we will have arrived at a new understanding of what is and is not going to happen in this house before the frost." He did not move. "Until 10 o'clock, she said gently. "I would recommend that you sit down and drink your coffee. It is going to be, I think, the last quiet hour you and I will ever spend across a breakfast table. I find on reflection that I want to remember it. I hope you will oblige me by staying." A long silence. Then very slowly, the way a man sits when the ground under him has moved, and he has not yet decided whether to stand on it or not. Jonathan Whitford sat down. He picked up his coffee. His hand was shaking. Hers was not. He drank the coffee because a man whose hand is shaking will drink coffee rather than sit with his hand empty in front of a wife he no longer understands. And Eliza watched him drink it, and she did not speak again until the clock in the hall struck 9. When it struck, she rose. "Jonathan." "Eliza, I am going to the parlor now. The sofa, I believe, will suit me best. You will find me there at 10. I suggest you use the intervening hour to decide which of 3 positions you mean to take." He did not look up. "Which 3? You may confess. You may deny. Or you may sit quietly and allow the women in your life to tell the truth for you. 2 of the 3 end with you retaining a name in this county. 1 of them does not. I would think carefully if I were you about which 2. She walked out. She walked down the hall to the south parlor, and she sat on the long sofa, and she placed the work-basket at her feet, and she folded her hands in her lap, and she waited. At 9:15, Margaret came in. "He's in the study, ma'am." "Alone." "Alone. Aunt Beatrice is with him now. Came down 5 minutes after you left the breakfast room. She'd been waiting at the top of the stair. She knew something was happening." "Good. Ma'am?" "Yes. I don't reckon she's on his side this morning." "No, Margaret. I don't reckon she is either." At 9:30, Finch came downstairs, and he did not stop to ask what was happening, and he went directly into the study without knocking, and the study door closed behind him. At 9:45, Evelyn Carter returned. She came in through the front door in the same traveling cloak with the same mud on the hem and the same exhausted directness in her eyes, and Margaret took the cloak without a word, and Evelyn came into the parlor, and she sat on the long sofa beside Eliza, and she said, "It's done. The letter is on the northbound post." Zeke said the word sparrow and handed it straight to the driver himself. "Thank you, Miss Carter." "Mrs. Whitford." "Yes. I do not know what I am going to do after this." "Neither do I. We will work it out later in the week. There is a boarding house in Philadelphia that takes respectable women without questions. It is on Arch Street. Mr. Pierce has the address. A pause. You have thought of everything. I have had 6 days, Miss Carter. It is astonishing what a woman can think of in 6 days if she stops wasting them on hoping. At 10 o'clock exactly, the study door opened. Jonathan came out first. Beatrice followed. Finch came last with his portfolio under his arm and an expression on his face that was not quite pity and not quite something else. They came into the parlor. Jonathan stopped in the doorway when he saw Evelyn on the sofa. He did not move for a full 4 seconds. It was. Eliza thought the first honest expression she had ever seen on his face, a look of a man who has been told a thing and has not believed it until the moment the thing is sitting in his own parlor, and who understands in that moment that every plan he made before walking through the door is now worthless. Evelyn. Jonathan. What are you? Sit down, Jonathan. Evelyn, you. Sit down. He sat. Beatrice sat beside him. Finch took the wing chair. Margaret stood in the doorway with her hands folded because Eliza had asked her quietly to stand there, and because Margaret had understood, without being told, that a man is less likely to lose his composure in a room containing a housekeeper who has known him since he was 19. Eliza did not rise. She spoke from the sofa. Mr. Finch? Madam. Have you been informed within the last hour of a petition filed yesterday afternoon at the county court in Richmond by my husband? A beat. I have, madam. By whom? By your husband himself, within the last half hour, in the study. And the petition has been as of this morning voluntarily withdrawn. Voluntarily. In writing. Witnessed by myself. To be hand-carried to Richmond this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Finch. Evelyn Carter leaned forward. Jonathan. Evelyn, please. Jonathan, look at me. He looked at her. I loved you, she said, and her voice was so quiet that everyone in the room had to lean toward it. Since I was 12 years old. I kept your letters tied in a ribbon that turned from green to brown. I waited through a wedding I was not invited to. I waited through a marriage you told me was paperwork. I waited 3 nights ago when you wrote me that a woman carrying your child was about to be locked in a room with a key on the outside. I waited that long, Jonathan. I waited until I read the sentence, a fetus has no standing. And then I got on a coach at dawn and I rode for 2.5 days, and I knocked on the kitchen door of the woman you were about to destroy, because I will not be the reason. I will not be the reason a child grows up without a mother. Not even your child. Not even for you. She did not cry. She had done her crying 2 days ago in a coach alone. You will not write to me again. Evelyn. You will not write to me again. Evelyn, please. You will not speak my name in this house. You will not speak it in Williamsburg. You will not speak it in Richmond. If you do, Jonathan, the letter I delivered to the northbound post this morning, a letter in your hand, which I have read, which I have committed to memory, will be read aloud in a Philadelphia courtroom before the year is out. Mrs. Whitford's attorney has it. I gave it to him freely. I signed a statement in his presence this morning. It is done. Jonathan put his face in his hands. It was the first time Eliza realized with a kind of cold clarity that she had ever seen him do so. Aunt Beatrice turned to her. Eliza? Aunt? What do you want? Paper. Paper. 3 pieces of it signed today, witnessed by Mr. Finch, countersigned by you. The first confirms the document signed 6 days ago and adds to them a further clause that my husband will not at any time during my lifetime in any state or territory initiate or support any proceeding affecting my competency, my person, or the custody of any child born to me. The second transfers management of the Whitford estate during the minority of the heir I carry to a trust administered by Mr. Pierce of Philadelphia with yourself and Mr. Finch as co-trustees in this state. The third is a deed of separation. I will live from the 1st of September in a house I shall rent in Philadelphia. My husband will remain here. I will retain sole custody. He will retain a visiting right of 4 weeks in the summer, to commence no earlier than the child's 5th year supervised in a place of my choosing. A silence. Eliza, Beatrice said, a deed of separation in this state is not recognized, I know. It will be recognized in Pennsylvania. I am not asking Virginia to recognize it. I am asking my husband to sign it, and I am asking you to witness his signature, and I am asking Mr. Finch to notarize it, because a document signed and witnessed is a document that exists whether the state acknowledges it or not. When my son or daughter is 21 and asks me what happened in this house in the summer of 1820, I wish to place 3 pieces of paper in that grown child's hand and say, this is what your father agreed to in writing. The morning he discovered I was not quiet. Beatrice did not answer for a long moment. Then she turned to her nephew. Jonathan. Aunt? Sign. Aunt, I cannot sign, nephew. I am being asked to give up. You are being asked to keep your name, your house, and your liberty. You are being asked to do so in exchange for giving up a wife you never wanted, a mistress you do not deserve, and a daughter-in-law's good opinion of her husband, which, as none of us in this room have ever possessed such a thing, is not a meaningful loss. Sign. Finch opened the portfolio. The papers were already drawn. Eliza had drawn them herself in the small hours of the morning, and Finch had read them at 9:15, and Finch had made 3 small corrections of grammar, and he had told Beatrice in the study that in his professional opinion the documents were as fair as the circumstances would allow, and Beatrice had looked at him over her spectacles and had said, Mr. Finch, I do not require fair, I require final. Are they final? And Finch had said, Madam. They are. Jonathan signed. He signed each of the 3 pieces of paper with a hand that shook on the first, and steadied on the second, and on the third, moved with the flat resignation of a man who had just understood that his life from this morning forward would be measured not by the estate he ran or the name he carried, but by the small specific record of what he had been willing to sign in a south parlor on a summer morning when 2 women had walked into his house and closed the door behind them. When he had signed the last page, he set the pen down. He looked up at Eliza. Eliza. Jonathan. Was there ever... Don't. I only want to ask. Jonathan, I told you 6 days ago, I am not taking statements. I am taking signatures. You have given me the signatures. The statements will keep. They will keep, I suspect, for 40 years, and they will not change the shape of what happened here. And I will not be the woman who sits in Philadelphia reading your letters and wondering what you meant. I will be instead a woman who rises at 6 and feeds her child and runs a household of her own, and you will be a name on 3 pieces of paper in a drawer. She stood up. Mr. Finch. Madam. Make 3 certified copies of each. 1 set to Mr. Pierce by the Evening Post, 1 set to my bank in Philadelphia, 1 set to my hand which I will carry with me to the coach this afternoon. Madam. Aunt Beatrice. Child. I do not know what you will tell the county about this summer. I do not frankly care. But I will say to you, woman to woman, across a room in which we have both spent an hour doing what was necessary, that you surprised me this morning. I did not expect you to sit on my side of the table. I am not yet certain why you did. Beatrice looked at her for a long beat. Eliza? Aunt, I was married at 19 to a man who wrote a letter not unlike the one Miss Carter carried here this morning. I did not at the time have the means to answer it. I had no 17 letters in a ribbon. I had no attorney in Philadelphia. I had no 6 days. I had instead 43 years of widowhood in which to consider what I might have done if I had. When I saw you this morning, child, I saw what I might have been. One does not at 62 refuse the chance to sign a paper one would have given a great deal to see signed at 20. Eliza did not answer for a moment. Then she said very quietly, Thank you, Aunt. Thank you, child. She turned. Miss Carter. Mrs. Whitford. The coach leaves at 4. There is room in it if you wish. Philadelphia is not a small city. We need not be in the same street. But there is room. A pause. Mrs. Whitford. Think about it, Miss Carter. Do not answer now. Answer at 3. Evelyn Carter bowed her head. At 3:15, Evelyn Carter came into the front hall with the small satchel in her hand and the traveling cloak over her arm. And she looked at Eliza, who was standing by the door with a portable writing case in one hand and the work basket in the other, and she nodded once, and Eliza nodded back, and that was the whole of their negotiation. Lily was brought from Petersburg by the return driver at 2. The girl came through the kitchen door, pale, but not crying, and she went directly to her brother in the study, and she stood in front of him and she said, "Jonathan." "Lily, Eliza is leaving." "I know. I am going with her." A silence. "Lily, I am 16, Jonathan. In 2 years I will be of an age to choose my own household. I am choosing now. I am choosing the woman who told me last week that I was not alone in this house. I am not choosing you." She paused. "I love you. You are my brother. I will write to you. But I am not staying in a house where the wife who was kind to me was almost put in a locked room because she was no longer quiet." He did not argue. He did not, Eliza thought afterward, have an argument left. He said very quietly, "Take your grandmother's locket. It was meant for you." "I have it." "Write to Aunt Beatrice from Philadelphia." "I will." "Lily." "Yes." "I'm sorry." The girl did not answer. She turned and walked out of the study, and she took Eliza's free hand in the hall, and she did not let go of it again until the coach was past the gate and out on the North Road. At 4 o'clock, the coach stood in the drive. Margaret Hale stood at the open door with a basket of cold chicken and a pot of preserves and a small wrapped parcel that Eliza had not yet seen the inside of. "Margaret." "Ma'am." "You will not come with us." "No, ma'am." "You are staying in this house." "I am." "Mr. Whitford will require a housekeeper, and this house will require a witness, and I reckon the 2 positions are the same one for the next year or 2. I'll write you every Friday. You'll have word of everything that happens in this county before the county does." "Margaret." "Ma'am." "You saved my life." "Ma'am, I did no such thing. You saved your own life. I only unlocked a kitchen door at 5 in the morning and stirred the coffee while you did the rest." "Margaret." "Ma'am, if you cry on me now, I will cry, and I will not cry in front of Mr. Whitford. Get in the coach." Eliza got in the coach. Lily got in beside her. Evelyn Carter got in opposite. Aunt Beatrice stood in the drive with her hand on the open door, and she looked at the 3 of them, and she said, "I shall come to Philadelphia in the autumn. I have not been north in 11 years. I believe it is time." "Aunt?" "Child." She shut the door. Jonathan stood on the porch. He stood with one hand on the railing and the other in his coat pocket, and he watched his wife's coach pull out of the drive with his sister in it, and with another woman he had loved for 20 years in it, and with a child, his child, not yet the size of a peach in it, and he did not move, and he did not wave, and he did not, as far as Eliza could see from the window, cry. He only watched. She did not wave back. She turned her face forward, and she settled her hand on her stomach, and Lily took her other hand, and Evelyn Carter, across the coach with the mud still on the hem of her traveling cloak, closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 days, slept. The coach went past the gate. It went past the lane. It went past the post stage at Bridgewater Crossing, where Zeke Pratt tipped his hat from the seat of the mail buggy, and Eliza inclined her head to him and did not stop. It went past the county line at sundown. By the time the lamps were lit in the coach, they were in a different state, and by the time the coach was in a different state, Eliza Whitford had become, without ceremony, without announcement, without any paper yet signed to declare it, a different woman. She did not cry that night. She did not cry the next morning. She did not cry the week the coach arrived in Philadelphia, nor the day Mr. Pierce met her in the front room of a narrow house on Arch Street with a pot of tea and a stack of newly certified documents, nor the afternoon 3 weeks later when a letter arrived from Margaret Hale informing her that Mr. Jonathan Whitford had been seen at Sunday service alone, and that the congregation had been on the whole polite. She cried finally on the 14th of January, 1821, at 7 minutes past 5 in the morning, when a midwife laid a small, warm, wet creature on her chest and said, "Mrs. Whitford, a daughter." She cried then. She cried for perhaps a minute. Then she stopped, because Eliza Whitford was by that morning a woman who had taught herself that tears were currency, and she put her mouth close to the small damp head, and she said the words she had been saving for 6 months. You are mine. You are not a deadline. You are not a contract. You are not paperwork. You are a girl, and you are mine, and you will be raised in a house where no man behind any door will ever call your mother an acquisition, because your mother will not be in any room where a door like that exists. She kissed the top of the small wet head. She did not let go for an hour. And in a bedroom 2 miles away, Lily Whitford, 17 years old, enrolled in a Philadelphia school for young women, writing a letter she would not send, wrote in her diary a single line which she would 40 years later read aloud at her niece's wedding. My sister-in-law carried a child through a house that meant to break her, and she walked out with the child and the house and herself, and she did it without raising her voice once. Eliza Whitford lived 38 more years. She never returned to Virginia. She never married again. She did not need to. The law that had once made a woman's signature worth less than her husband's breath had not changed in her lifetime, and she had no intention of signing her name a second time into any arrangement that required her to be quiet for it. She raised her daughter. She raised Lily as her own. She took in over the years 4 other women who came to her door at 5 in the morning with mud on the hem of a traveling cloak and a letter in a satchel, and she did for them what Margaret Hale had done for her, which was to open the door without asking a question, and to stir the coffee while the woman did the rest. On her writing desk until the day she died, there sat a small leather writing case. Inside the case were 3 folded documents signed in a south parlor in Virginia on a morning in August of 1820, and tied with a ribbon that had once been green and was now the color of old tea. She never took them out. She never needed to. Their existence was enough. Because Eliza Whitford had learned at the age of 23 on a summer morning when she overheard a man she had married call her a deal. He had closed the one thing a woman of that century was not meant to know and never meant to use: that the world ran on paper, and that a woman who learned to write plainly, quickly, and in her own hand was a woman no door could ever be shut against again.